Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 11, the Perfect Society, the four social classes. But there's no purport to text 22 or 23. And so we're going to read a number of verses without just the translations. To be influential in battle, unconquerable, patient, challenging, and charitable, to control the body necessities, to be forgiving, to be attached to the Brahminical nature, to be always jolly and truthful. These are the symptoms of the... Well, of course you can read it. Glad everyone knows how to read here. Text 23. Being always devoted to the demigods, but just don't put it on there.
Okay.
Did you see it already?
No.
Okay. Well, I guess you can figure it out. You can put it on. Okay. Being always devoted to the demigods, the spiritual master, and the Supreme Lord Vishnu, endeavoring for advancement in religious principles, economic development for sense gratification, dharma, artha, and kama, believing in the words of the spiritual master in scripture, and always endeavoring with expertise in earning money. These are the symptoms of the... Text 24. Sudrasya shanati saucham seva swamin yamayaya amantra yagyo yasteyam Satyam go vipra rakshanam Sudrasya shanati saucham Sevas swamin yamaya Amantra yagyo yasteyam Satyam go vipra rakshanam. Shanati saucham Vaswamini amaya Amantra yagyo yastyayam Satyam go vipra rakshanam Sudrasya janati saucham Seva swaminyamaya Amantra yagyo yastyayam Satyam go vipra rakshanam Sudrasya janati saucham Seva swaminyamaya We have 3 official chanters. Anyone else like to try? Do something different? Iri. Sudrasyanati saucham Seva swaminyamaya Amantra yagyo yastyayam Satyam go vipra rakshanam. Good. Sudrasya, of the Shudra, the 4th grade of man in society. The worker. Most people have stopped work nowadays. No more Shudras. Shanati, obedience to the higher classes. the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. Saucham, cleanliness, seva, service, swamini, to the master who maintains him, amaya, without duplicity, amantra yagya, performance of sacrifices, simply by offering obeisances. Well, that's pretty easy, perform that sacrifice. Without mantras. He certainly, asteyam, practicing not to steal. Takes a lot of practice. Satyam, truthfulness. Go, cows. Vipra, brahmanas. Rakshanam, protecting. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Offering obeisances to the higher sections of society, the brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, being always clean, being free from duplicity, serving one's master, performing sacrifices without uttering mantras, not stealing, always speaking the truth, and giving all protection to the cows and brahmanas. These are the symptoms of the Shudra. Purport. It is everyone's experience that workers or servants are generally accustomed to stealing. Does everyone have that experience? Yeah? What was your experience? Microphone.
They were doing some renovations at my father's place. They stole all his tools from a shed.
All of them?
Yeah.
How much were they worth?
I don't know, a few thousand.
Did he get them back?
No.
Did he know who the workers were?
Yeah.
We couldn't prove it.
Mm-hmm.
Sticky fingers. Anyone else have experiences? Workers stealing? Yeah, we have nothing to steal hardly. But a first-class servant is one who does not steal. Here it is recommended that first-class Shudra must remain very clean, must not steal or speak lies, and must always render service to his master. A Shudra may attend sacrifices and Vedic ritualistic ceremonies along with his master, but he should not utter the mantras, for these may be uttered only by the members of the higher sections of society. Unless one is completely pure and has been raised to the standard of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, in other words, unless one is a Dvija, twice born, the chanting of mantras will not be fruitful. Namo Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Sarasvatunde Ve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyadyade Satarne. Parikshit Maharaj was on tour, going all over his kingdom, and he saw one black man dressed in the garb of a king, and he was beating on a cow and a bull. Now, immediately, Parikshit Maharaj understood that this man could not be a king. A king would not beat on a cow and a bull. That even a Shudra, as it mentioned here, is involved in the protection of the cows and the bulls. What to speak of a Kshatriya king? So he at once took out his sword to kill him. And Kali, in the form of a king, surrendered to Maharaj Parikshit. And, of course, he was vanquished from the kingdom, given an opportunity to live wherever there is gold. Because wherever there's gold, then there will certainly be prostitution, gambling, intoxication, and meat eating. Now we see here that the Shudra, he has to have at least some minimum qualification to actually be a first-class Shudra. It is not that everyone is automatically actually even on the level of a Shudra in Kali Yuga. Jayate Janmana Shudra. By birth, everyone is Shudra, but one has to raise himself. Janmana Jayate Shudra. Samskara, by samskar. Samskara bhavat dvija, to be twice born. Some impression that there's something beyond the gross and subtle material bodies. And if one has that conception, then one can take the scriptures seriously. Janmana Jayate Shudra, Samskara bhavat dvija, Veda Pata Bhavat Vipra. And if we study the scripture, then we may become a Vipra, a learned person. Chanakapanda says a learned person is Matrivat Paradareshu, Paradvareshu Losravat, Atmavat Parabhuteshu Yakpashiti Sapanditaha. That a Pandit, a learned person, a Vipra, is one who sees every woman except for his wife to be just like his mother, and sees everyone else's property to be just like garbage in the street, and sees all living entities as qualitatively equal to himself, that everyone is spiritual. So this is called a learned person. Studying the Vedas is not simply to chant all these mantras or to be able to speculate by logic, Nyaya. Actually, studying the Vedas should reach the conclusion that, at least in the civilized platform, to see every woman to be, except for one's wife, to be just like one's mother. If we don't see like that, then our so-called knowledge has no real value. If we don't see everyone's property to be just except for one's own, to be like garbage in the street, then we haven't really learned anything. And if we don't see all living entities as spiritual beings, qualitatively equal to ourselves, then we're in ignorance. So learning doesn't require many hundreds of fields of learning. It requires just understanding three things. That every lady should be viewed to be just like one's mother, except for one's wife. Everything, all the property here doesn't belong to us. And all living entities are spiritual beings. Now, higher than that, which should include that, in other words, if we accept that Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer, that Krishna is the ultimate proprietor, and that Krishna is the ultimate friend, all living entities, then naturally we won't be trying to become the enjoyer on any level. And if Krishna is the proprietor of everything, then I won't be, even my own so-called possessions, I won't consider them mine. I'll consider everything belongs to Krishna. And if Krishna is a friend of everyone, then everyone must be a spiritual being. In other words, Krishna consciousness is supposed to include the qualities that are found, the good qualities found in the other orders of life, in the four orders, the brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas, as well as shudra, vaishya, kshatriya, and brahman. That vaishnav is supposed to have all the good qualities. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavata kinchana savar gunas tatra samastate sura. Hara bhaktasya kuto maha gunan manorite dasati bhadavato vahi. That if one acquires Krishna consciousness, is yasti bhaktir bhagavata kinchana, and actually becomes a kinchana, not desiring to become the proprietor of this material world. Kinchit means something, and akinchit means nothing. Akinchana means not possessing anything. It's yasti bhaktir. Because of bhakti, love for Krishna, one doesn't desire anything else. If one has higher taste, then he doesn't desire the lower things. So if one is actually in love with Krishna, then all the external energy is not very attractive. At least possessing it. If one possesses Krishna, then everything else seems to be insignificant. Tuchava. It's yasti bhaktir bhagavad akinchana savargunas tatra samasate sura. And then if one is in contact with Krishna and the soul wakes up, then he acquires all the good qualities, because the soul by nature has all good qualities in contact with Krishna. It's only due to his being influenced by the modes of material nature, he exhibits externally the modes of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. But this is not the inherent nature of the soul. This is simply his being influenced by a particular mode of nature. So, by the development of Krishna consciousness, the good qualities should be there. And if one is not Krishna conscious, or when we're not Krishna conscious, then manorate nasati davato vahi. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavata kinchana savarganas tatra samasate sura hara bhaktasya, one who's not hara abhaktasya, one who's not a devotee of Krishna, of Hari, hara bhaktasya kuto mahagunan, then where can there be any good quality in them? Manorate nasati davate vahi. They're simply being subjected to the influence of their mind. Whatever mode of material nature is influencing them, that's what they do. That's how they act. That's how they think. That's how they perceive things. So, because the modes of material nature generally drag one down, if one doesn't have first-class association, one may be apparently a gentleman or a lady, but in the course of time, by bad association, one will also become influenced by the lower modes and therefore exhibit qualities of a lower nature. But if one is actually in contact with the spiritual nature, contact with the devotees, taking advantage of the spiritual nature, then all the good qualities should be there. So if one is stealing, one is lying, what to speak of other things, one is unclean, then one is not even on the level of the Shudra, although one may be claiming by showing his sacred thread that he's on the level of a Brahmin. But this is simply a show. It's not a reality. It's not. Therefore, for the devotees to be clean is not just like one of the choices. You know, if I want to, I'll be clean. Because I'm already transcendental. And to add on to my elaborate transcendental qualities, I'll even wash my hands once in a while, just to show a good example for the rest of the fallen souls. No, cleanliness is not an option, nor is truthfulness an option if one wants to come to at least a higher mode of material nature, what to speak of actually experiencing transcendence. And one must be prepared to render service. Now, if one is stealing, doesn't mean necessarily just sticky fingers that I see something. Usually devotees say, well, this is a book. Everything belongs to Krishna. Let me take the book. I'll return it next year. Hopefully the person will be still alive. You can get it back. Usually we steal something small. Sometimes devotees steal something. So-called devotees steal a little bit bigger. But just the enviousness that someone has something I don't have is also not a very good quality. It's a precursor for stealing. Therefore, it is not that we should think, oh, these are Shudras, and I'm a great Brahmin, I'm a Vaishnava, or whatever. We actually have to be careful that we develop cleanliness. We develop all the good qualities. Cleanliness is essential. Without being clean, one will be influenced by ignorance. And when one is influenced by ignorance, then one will overeat, one will oversleep, one will also have illicit sex, and one will actually become violent, just beginning with uncleanliness. One will be influenced by ignorance. And what to speak of stealing, which is the idea that I can get something for nothing and without Krishna's sanction. That's obviously, these are all mode of ignorance. So a Shudra, in order to raise himself out of the mode of ignorance, he has to have at least these basic qualities. And for us to raise ourselves out of the mode of ignorance, which would be easier for us because of the influence of the holy name, the influence of devotee association, the worship of the deities, that we should be checking whether I'm actually getting out of the mode of ignorance. Being in the mode of ignorance and being a Vaishnava don't go together. Or at least Kapila Dev says in the 4th chapter, Lord Kapila Dev, that there are different kinds of devotees. There's a devotee a separatist who's in the mode of ignorance. He sees himself as separate from Krishna and from Krishna's devotees. And he exhibits the qualities of the lower modes of nature, especially anger and frustration. Those in the mode of passion, they're always thinking what they're going to gain from their service, whether they're getting more comfortable position. And those in the mode of goodness, they're not necessarily in love with Krishna, but at least they're dutiful in their activities. And by that, they can learn to concentrate their minds upon Krishna while they're doing their service, and eventually that natural love for Krishna will be invoked. In any case, we should not be so convinced that we're out of the modes of nature just because we have a bead bag or a sika or whatever. If it was that easier, then material nature would be easy to overcome. But Krishna says, Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya dharatyaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. This material nature is actually very difficult to overcome. Even great stalwart devotees fell victim, as Prabhupada said, due to the allurements of women and wealth. Women will naturally, or men for women, will naturally invoke lust and uncleanliness mentally. If one is mentally unclean, one will become lazy in terms of external cleanliness. And the lusting after wealth will give one plans how to steal from others, how to illegally, not without following the Vedic Dharma, steal from others. Of course, nowadays, you can steal from others and it's perfectly legal if you do it so-called legally. Learn how to cheat people just for your sense gratification. So it may be legal according to the state, but if it's not legal according to the mode of the material nature, then one will be punished. And one of the punishments is that one's consciousness will be covered by the mode of ignorance, and one will be forced eventually into the lower species of life. Therefore, one has to at least come to the stage of knowledge so that we're aware of what our good qualities are, how we're acting as an instrument for Krishna, and also what's pulling us down so we can stop being pulled down. And part of that is we think we're perfect somehow or another, and that we don't have to worry about our lower qualities. There's no improvement I have to make because I'm doing, all my activities are perfect. I chant my rounds, I come to the program sometimes, I take prasadam, and anyone who thinks that I'm not perfect, anyone who perceives some lower mode of nature in my activities or conscious, they must be a demon because I'm a devotee. The demons are always envious of the devotees. But therefore, in one sense, we have to be encouraged that we are on the devotional path, but we should not be foolish and naive and think that the devotional path is so easy that I don't have to do anything, that I'm above Bharat Maharaj, who became attracted by a deer because he was only on the platform of Baba, and I'm on some other platform. We're definitely on another platform, but I don't think it's higher than Baba. Or we take these other persons we see that they have some difficulty and we criticize them as if we don't have any difficulty. Some devotee may have difficulty, fall down, and we get on their case, they're a demon, as if I'm a divine personality and that I'm not being influenced by the modes of nature. And that we can get on devotees' cases because they're being influenced by the modes of nature and that I'm free from these things and therefore I have the right to criticize. No, as soon as one criticizes, then it once becomes implicated into the modes of nature, and then one will find oneself in the same position as the person one is criticizing. Bhumi the cow, when she was being beaten, I think it was the bull actually being beaten, the bull of religiosity, by the Shudra, when Parikshit Maharaj asked, who did this to you? Dharma refused, I think it was Dharma, refused to answer. Because he said that ultimately everything is being conducted by Krishna. Nothing happens without Krishna's sanction. So if I start blaming Krishna, I'm going to get into trouble. So we have to see the world as being an arrangement of Krishna and try to utilize that arrangement so that we can get out of the low modes of nature and remain steady on the spiritual platform. Then our activities will become productive and successful in the spiritual sense. So good Shudra, as it says here, is hard to find. Good servants are hard to find. Someone who doesn't steal, who's clean, who doesn't lie. How many people in society are like that? But we actually have to develop that, and then we can teach others how to develop those good qualities, especially through the process of pure devotional service. In contact with Krishna, all the good qualities will manifest, but we have to learn the process of getting in contact with Krishna. And part of that means to avoid getting in contact with the material nature. They don't go together, especially the lower modes. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Comments? You answer questions, everything becomes very peaceful. Silence. You can hear the microphone. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grandharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande.